Hi, I'm Zen Madman. Welcome to Hand of the Day number 2. We're going to look at another 3-bet pot here that I played on WSOP NL200. The button opens. I've got ace-4 of spades in the small blind. My opponent is a somewhat loose player with whom I would like to play pots. So they open limp sometimes. Perhaps their button raising range is a bit stronger than most players, but it's also possible it's wider than most. So ace-4 suited is a good 3-bet semi-bluffing hand that blocks premiums and has good equity when called, so I re-raise to roughly 4 times their open size. If the big blind had been another player who I wanted to play pots with, I would consider just calling here. As it plays out, the big blind folds, the button calls, and we see this flop heads up. As a small blind 3-better, I don't think I flop a lot of trips on this board. Theoretically, neither does my opponent, but I think a loose player may have more 9x than a more theoretically sound player. I check. And as my range, doesn't love this flop and my hand doesn't like it at all. So my opponent checks back, which I think could be some small pairs, the occasional 8, and a bunch of junk. Also, maybe a hand like quads. We'll see. And the turn is an 8 of diamonds, giving me 2 pair with the nut kicker. The board is very wet. 2 flush draws and some obvious straight draws are possible. I bet 1/3 pot to protect my equity and charge my opponent to draw, but I'm thinking perhaps inducing bluffs from counterfeit underpairs like 5s and 6s might be a better play. My opponent folds, indicating they did not have quads. Likely they had absolutely nothing. And, I win the pot, which is cool. Let's take a look at how the solver plays this spot. Here we are in GTO Base, a currently freely available, very powerful set of solve solutions where you can just click through and look at how the solver wants to play different spots. It's quite awesome. So I am going to give my opponent a normal button opening range. Here, as you'll see, that they use a 3-bet or fold strat. I believe these pre-flop ranges are from Monker Sims. I could be mistaken. And you'll see that I am 3-betting ace-4 suited, ace-5 suited pure. If I have a range that has flats in it, I believe I mix those hands, especially ace-4 suited as a flat sum. You can see that my assertion that I don't have a lot of 9x in my range is fairly off, right? I mean, queen-9 suited is a mix, 9-8 suited is a mix, but like 10-9 suited, jack-9, king-9, ace-9, all of those suited hands are going to be 3-betting. So I think I'm going to bet this flop a lot more than I thought I should bet this flop. So I make it 11 blinds, give or take, and the big blind folds. You don't actually have to click that. You can go straight through to button who calls, and it just assumes that the big blind folded. You'll see it's in green. It like defaults to that. So it's 9, 8, 9 with 2 clubs and a diamond. And we look at my range, and down in the lower right, it shows I'm only supposed to check 19% of the time. So my thought that I'm not supposed to bet this a lot was off, right? Because I do actually have a lot of trips in my range, and you'll see that I have a range of bet sizes from 3rd pot, half pot, 2/3 pot. It's basically centering on the half pot, right? So I imagine I could go half pot for range. I certainly think I could go 3rd pot for range, and those would be fine strategies. However, if we look at my hand specifically, ace-4 without a flush draw, ace-4, ace-5 without a flush draw, those are basically the hands that want a pure check. We can see king-queen off also, if it doesn't have a club, is mostly checking. So I think I got the overall strategy wrong on the flop, but the strategy with my specific hand was correct. So I did check, that's correct. We'll take a look at my opponent's range and see that there are a lot of 9x hands here as well. And I would imagine a kind of maybe loose passive player might actually have even more 9x than they should, right? But they should have all of these suited 9x hands, and that really means that we're both going to have a fair number of kind of nutty combos, but I've got all the pocket aces, pocket kings, so that's why I get to bet so much. They're supposed to check back about half the time, bet small about half the time. They did go ahead and check back. We can see that the 9x bets a lot, and a lot of the 8x bets, so when we get to the turn, I think my ace high is going to be fairly strong. So it goes check, check on the flop. The turn is the 9. It's not the 9 of anything. It's the 8 of diamonds. We already have 2 9s. So now we have 9s and 8s and clubs and diamonds. Oh my. I have the 2 pair with the ace kicker, right? And it's loading, and we can see that ace-4 of spades is a pure check. So that kind of confirms my suspicion that I'm supposed to check this and induce bluffs. If we look and down here at my range, I'm supposed to check like 87% of the time. So basically, if I didn't want to bet this flop, I'm not going to want to bet this turn very much. Yeah, I'm going to have some like bottom quads, and actually top quads are just pure checking, it looks like. And like, you know, some draws are going to bet, and some overcards. It looks like the undercards, like these under pairs that got counterfeited, aren't bluffing much. And the only ace 5, ace 4 that are betting are like ones that picked up a flush draw or maybe flopped a flush draw unchecked. I did bet, so we'll take a look at that line. When I bet, what are they supposed to do? They're just folding all these under pairs. Actually, some of them are supposed to raise bluff, which I don't think people are going to do very often. And I mean, some people might, but a lot won't. They're supposed to raise a fair amount of ace X, like especially if it has a flush draw to go with it. But even just like ace 10 is just raising a bunch of those. Ace 10 of hearts, ace 10 of spades, that 10 of hearts blocks, you know, 10 9 of hearts, 10 8 of hearts. So I think that's one reason that makes a good bluff. It's not going to run into the nuts so often. And, you know, they're raising all of these 8X hands, and they're actually just calling with 9X, probably because they want me to bet again, and then they can, you know, rip it on the river. But if we go back and see, okay, what would have happened if I checked? Would they have bluffed with these small pocket pairs? Yes, they would have, right? In theory, in practice, who knows, right? 2s, 3s, 4s are supposed to mostly bluff here. And like 5s, 6s, and to a lesser extent 7s are mostly just kind of checking back, giving up. Obviously, they do have a bunch of value hands still, like 8X and 9X, but not so many of those because they bet a lot on the flop. And they're betting a fair amount of their ace high for value, although most of those are with flush draws. I guess on the flop, maybe they were supposed to bet like their ace 4 offsuit, which is interesting that they're supposed to bet their ace 4 offsuit and I'm supposed to check mine. One thing about checking my ace high is like, what am I supposed to do if they bet, right? So if they bet, they're usually using like a third sizing, but they can go with a 2/3 sizing. Who knows what they'd actually use? But if we look at this third sizing, just pure call with ace 4. It's just inducing bluffs. Ace 5 is actually even raising some with a flush draw, maybe trying to get someone to fold a free roll. Obviously, you're not trying to make anyone fold a 9 or an 8, right? Not in theory land. But so we call with the ace 4, and then say the river's just like a brick. It's not a brick, but it is a brick, right? I mean, I'll make it a different card, like say a 5. The pair obviously doesn't help us, but it does mean that we would be blocking some of their boats that they could have backed into. So I'm just supposed to check pure in that spot, and then their bet sizings are going to be large, right? Pot or jam, but they're supposed to check back 60% of the time, and I'm pretty much just going to win every time they check back. So I can basically be check call, check fold on the turn and river with my ace 4, but still realize a fair amount of equity because they're supposed to check that river a ton. If we're against someone who exploitatively just bluffs all the time when we take that line, then, you know, we should be checking probably some nuttier hands as well, and maybe calling with the ace 4 or folding the turn, perhaps. But so let's see what happens if they bet big. Am I supposed to like hero this off? Maybe. Probably not. Definitely not with the flush draws that's blocking a lot of the hands that we would expect them to be have been barreling with, I guess. But mostly we get to fold that. And then the ace 5, this probably gets to call because it is blocking like 5-5. Did they have 5-5? Let's just go back and see. They had a little bit of 5-5, yeah. So, you know, when you have that third pair, it is helpful insofar as it can block bluffs. It can block value, and thus their range is going to be weighted more towards bluffs. All right, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.